Welcome into CyHawk Talk here on a Wednesday, talking a little bit about Iowa's matchup with Rutgers, Big Ten road opener, and Iowa State idle this week, but Ben still got plenty to talk about, and he's looking a little dapper. Ben, how's your week going as you're thinking about, an easy weekend with a bye week?
Yes, definitely looking forward to the first of a few different bye weeks for Iowa State. Of course, the benefit of going to play that game in Ireland is they get to kind of rest up before Big 12 play starts. No special occasion for me in the tie today. Just thought I'd class it up a little bit here on CyHawk Talk.
Here I am thinking I'm looking all right with my golf polo on. At least I got a collar. And then I look at the Zoom and Ben's wearing a suit and tie. So we'll see if next week maybe I can match him there a little bit better.
Break out your top hat if you have one of those.
I do not. I am not quite there with my fashion game. But we'll go ahead and start talking about the Hawkeyes a little bit and what I'm looking for. And number one is, can the passing game maintain what it did last week against UMass? Threw for more than 200 yards for, the first time this season they looked explosive. It was actually the most total yardage that they put together since week 3 last year when they beat Troy in a game that got a little scary for a little while there because of what Devontae Ross could do for the Trojans, but Iowa pulled it out and put up 462 yards of total offense. Iowa put up 435 this last week. So, plenty to be encouraged about. And I predicted that that's the way it was going to go for the passing game and the offense is that, this is the get right opportunity against a struggling UMass pass defense. And they did that. Now it's, can you maintain it? Can you be that team that we saw, push the ball down the field and go the length of the field in less than 2 minutes and have the fastest touchdown since the 2023 season opener? That's the number one thing I am looking at.
And you do such a good job of keeping up with this depth chart and injury report things for Iowa State or for Iowa on the Quad City Times. What's the latest on running back Kamari Moulton, and what are you thinking you might see out of him on this Friday night game?
That's the number two thing I'm looking at. And I'm not quite sure what we're going to see about it. And that's going to be the most interesting part of it. We know Xavier Williams is going to miss. It was kind of interesting on Monday when they've had these major injuries. Usually the player gets removed from the depth chart if they're going to miss the game. Xavier Williams was left on the depth chart. Kamari Moulton was left off the depth chart. And then on Tuesday, Ferentz rules Xavier Williams out, says he's going to miss a couple of weeks, and then says Kamari Moulton has a chance to play. And so I saw some people take that to mean, he's expected to play. I took it to mean, we're not quite sure. I listed him as questionable in my tweet because I think that's the best way you could put it right now. He might play, he might not play. I expect he'll travel to Rutgers and be kind of a game time decision based on the encouraging and positive way Ferentz has talked about the injury dating back to Saturday after the UMass victory. But if Kamari Moulton does play, I'll be curious to see what they tell us in terms of his health with how they use him. Are they going to run him as if he is the starter, as if he is, that guy they were going to lean on going into the U Albany game? Or is he just going to be kind of, worked in, kind of a conditioning kind of assignment almost? He's not, you can't send him down to AAA, but you can get him a couple of easy touches, easy runs, maybe keep him out of harm's way with how you run him this weekend. So that'll be what I'm keenly looking at in terms of Kamari Moulton in the run game. And I do think it is very important for him to get back. I think we've seen the running game struggle in the 2 games he's missed completely. The U Albany game ran wild, obviously more than 300 yards. But the 2 games Kamari's been out, it's been a bit of a struggle to run, which doesn't make sense behind such a veteran and such a strong offensive line.
It would be pretty cool if you could sign a 2-week contract with Drake or you and I and go get Kamari Moulton some reps down there. Maybe we should look into that AAA in college football.
I mean, with the way college football is headed and with these Power Four conferences wanting to become the junior NFL, maybe that will be the way it goes here in the near future. I've often thought that, maybe another one of my stupid ideas that I might have to write a column about would be, could these teams potentially stash recruits on an FCS program nearby and just turn them into feeder programs like, hey, we're not going to have playing time for you right away, but we'll go play for you and I, and then in 2 years transfer from you and I, and you'll just walk right into a starting job here at Iowa. I don't think it's a crazy or outlandish thing to think of because that's basically how FCS programs are being used right now just without that sort of agreement, right? So, UNI gets a stud freshman, they play right away, gone immediately. I can think of Omar Brown, whose UNI jersey is actually hanging on my wall off screen here. He had 2 great years at UNI and then transfers and goes and becomes a really solid player for Nebraska. Now he's with my Green Bay Packers in the NFL. So I don't think it's completely crazy to suggest that, though I'm sure the people of X would also just be like, oh, yep, Ethan's back talking about his stupid ideas again.
Well, if you want to go check out a stupid idea of Ethan Petrix, or maybe you don't think it was stupid, we had some mixed reviews on it. He wrote a column about how Iowa State can avoid embarrassing non-conference matchups against inferior opponents. So go check that one out. A lot of buzz on the Quad City Times.
Not to sound as though I lack humility, but I think that once people read beyond the headline or the 2 minute clip I posted on X, I think that they understood kind of where I was coming from, and it seemed more like a well reasoned idea than the headline would suggest.
Mm. You be the judge. Go read it and let us know in the comments on CyHawk Talk. What is I mean, I know from a lot of Iowa State fans who I've spoken to this week, they're excited to see how Iowa looks because I think it might give Iowa State maybe another data point of what the win in CyHawk actually means for its, resume and stuff. What is Iowa looking to prove out there against Rutgers?
Yeah, I guess I didn't really consider it. We've talked about this a couple of times, but I didn't even consider it to be a prove it game for a couple of different teams here because Iowa State, we're kind of thinking, who are they? What do they have in that program? Because, maybe the Iowa win doesn't look great. The Kansas State win looks horrible. South Dakota State is what it is, or South Dakota is what it is, and Arkansas State is what it is. And so maybe this could be a game that, not only Iowa can pull conclusions from, but Iowa State can as well. But this is kind of the prove it game. You're going to figure out who you are as a program. Are you the program that struggled against UAlbany, that lost to Iowa State, and kind of can fans expect maybe a rocky season ahead? I can think back to the Michigan State game where they kind of showed us who they were last year. It's like, oh, this isn't going to be the team we thought they were. College football playoff dreams are dead. And it's just going to be maybe a season where we're competing for a more prestigious bowl game, a Pop Tarts Bowl esque bowl maybe. And so I think that's what this game's going to be. If you go out and stink it up, even still, if they pull out a win but look bad in so doing, I think that could tell us a lot about who this team is. If they go out and beat Rutgers, maybe the dream of the 11-1 mythical season stays alive here, and those college football playoff dreams stay alive. If they look really convincing in a win over Rutgers, that could be really encouraging as well as you're looking down the barrel at a Indiana coming to Iowa for homecoming the next week.
Mm.
As you're kind of navigating the bye week and kicking your feet up, maybe playing a couple extra rounds of golf here before it gets too cold outside to have the clubs going. What are you kind of thinking about in terms of bye week? I saw a schedule story pop up on the front page of the Quad City Times last week that was or yesterday that was a little intriguing to me about maybe there are some games that don't look as tough as they used to because those teams have proven to not be as strong as you thought they were going to be going into the season. But what are you looking at in terms of schedule for the Cyclones?
Yeah, one of the pieces I wrote for Iowa State's bye week is such a good exercise to go in and re-rank the most difficult games remaining on Iowa State's schedule. And, you have to do that almost every year with the Big 12 because so much changes from Iowa State's ranked win against Kansas State that felt like an accomplishment in the moment and maybe less so now. So I went back and the big takeaway, Ethan, was Iowa State's schedule is not as difficult as I thought it was going to be entering the season. And I say that because the two other teams in the Big 12 ranked in the AP poll are Utah and Texas Tech. And the Cyclones avoid both of those teams. So, you look at the remaining games, and I think it comes out pretty favorable. There are some tough ones, though, on the schedule. And I'll go through maybe the first couple, and you can read the rest online. But the November 8th game at TCU is the toughest game remaining on Iowa State's schedule from a quality of opponent standpoint and from where it sits on the schedule standpoint and from a road game standpoint. So that's going to be a tough one. I had the Kansas game at home on November 22nd as next. And then I think things get a little bit more muddled with BYU in Arizona and Arizona State coming to town. And, there are some easy ones. I don't think the Oklahoma State game or the Colorado game is intimidating everybody. So it was fun, and kind of one of the things I'm watching is what does Iowa State's strength of schedule mean, and how does it change as we get more and more of the way through this college football season. Now, the second thing that Iowa State fans need to be watching, one of the storylines I'm going to be monitoring this bye week is Kyle Conrarty's health. We saw Iowa State's kicker get injured against Arkansas State, and he's been such a weapon. You know that, Iowa State fans know that, Iowa fans know that. But everything I'm hearing, Ethan, is that this is going to be a situation where Iowa State might have to play and navigate a portion of its schedule without Kyle Conrarty. So pretty much right now, that leaves the Cyclones down to freshman kicker Chase Smith, whose long in high school was 42 yards. He was an athlete in high school, played quarterback. I'm not sure he was exclusively a kicker. So that certainly changes the way Iowa State's going to have to navigate some of these scenarios, and the analytics all change in terms of, hey, no longer does a 45-yard field goal sound like a chip shot. So Kyle Conrarty's health is going to be definitely one of the things I'm looking for this week, and as Iowa State goes throughout its bye.
Cycling back to the schedule discussion, I think it's been interesting how difficult this expanded Big 12 has been to read preseason. I think you look at the expanded SEC, the expanded Big 10, those have been fairly easy reads. The teams you expected to be the top of the conference have been the top of the conference, with maybe the exception of Indiana in the Big 10, kind of coming out of 17th place in the preseason poll last year to being a college football playoff team last year. But the Big 12, the teams you think are going to be really good end up, maybe disappointing. The teams that you think are going to be nothing burgers end up being, the Arizona States of the world. I can think last year you had that Utah State game scheduled as a potential one you might need to be in Salt Lake City for. And then by the time it came around, it was like, yeah, probably don't need to go to this one. Utah is maybe the weakest team in the Big 12, or one of the most disappointing teams in the Big 12. So it's been really interesting to see how this Big 12 has adapted to those extra teams. And in your opinion, is it going to affect the way not only Iowa State is, seen in terms of the AP poll, but the entire conference is seen in the AP poll, because they are so hard to read that, the teams that are ranked in the top 25 going into the season aren't able to maintain that poll momentum, immediately drop out of the poll, and then you're costing teams these marquee wins early.
That's such a good point that you bring up. And that's the reason why the Big 12 scrapped the preseason media poll. Because us in the media, we didn't know anything clearly last year. We picked Arizona State last in the Big 12. And as they tried to climb in the AP poll and college football playoff rankings, they were fighting that stigma throughout the entire season of, hey, this isn't a good Arizona State team. When the reality is, in college football now, we don't know how anybody is going to come together when everybody's bringing in so many transfers. And the idea is, how well can these guys mesh together? So that's going to be something I'm watching as Iowa State sits idle this week. Are the teams ahead of them and the teams behind them in the AP poll? The Cyclones ranked number 12 in the week 4 AP poll after the victory against Arkansas State, which was a little bit of a surprise. They've moved up, starting at 22, 16, 14, and up 2 spots after a uninspiring win against Arkansas State. So maybe you think, well, are people just not watching the games? Probably some truth to that. But also, the teams ahead of Iowa State lost. So on a bye week, what kind of respect will Iowa State get in the AP poll? If some of these teams ahead of them, say Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Illinois, lose, does Iowa State move up in the AP poll? Or is this going to be a week where, regardless of what happens, the Cyclones are going to drop a couple spots? It's certainly something to monitor as the college football playoff rankings start on November 4th. That's when you really start to care about what that little number says. But I'm going to be interested to see kind of the national respect of Iowa State in the Big 12 as they sit idle when the week 5 AP poll comes out.
I'm just going to call my shot here, and there's going to be one outrageous team ahead of Iowa State next week. I think there's going to be a team that probably doesn't deserve to be there that's ahead of Iowa State, and it's probably going to get some Cyclone fans fired up. I don't know if they're necessarily going to drop, but I just think that I can feel like an SEC team that has no business being there, or an ACC team or a Big Ten team, just that no business being ahead of an undefeated Big 12 leader. And it's just, that's just the way the poll works. I just feel like that's going to be what you can expect. And then I'd also like to commend you for your generosity and not participating in the Big 12 poll, but still taking the blame for not picking Arizona State to win the conference last year. Very generous. I hope you're as generous when you grade my headlines, because you don't have headlines this week. So I'm going to ask you, Dr. Hutchins, to grade my 3 headlines this week when I'm all wrapped up. But we'll do that right after this. Going back to the scheduling thing, I had an idea when you were talking about that. If they want to save money by going on the road to an inferior opponent, why not play a road game against UNI, a road game against Drake? They're in state, lower travel costs. Heck, if you played Drake, you could sleep in whatever team hotel they use in Ames before a home game. They can just stay in that hotel the day before a Drake game, and play those teams. Those would be sellouts for those teams. You and I would absolutely pack the dome for that game. There might be more Cardinal than purple in the stands for that game, kind of like when Caitlin Clark came to the McLeod Center 3 years ago and beat up on the Panthers. But I think that would be really cool. And I'm a huge advocate for the in-state rivalries for those smaller schools to get a chance. I was talking about it in the college basketball when Iowa released its non-con schedule this last week. I mentioned it on X. But I just think that'd be really cool, and I think that's what made college football great. It was the regional aspect to it, and I feel like we've gotten away from that a little bit. It's like, yeah, I know Arkansas is kind of close to Iowa, but is that a tradition? Like, oh yeah, the Red Wolves, man, we've had such a great tradition facing off against the Red Wolves. Like, barf. Like, no, you don't. Quit scheduling MAC schools and go, go play in the Unidome once. I just like to see it.
I know you're always looking out for the little guy, Ethan, but I think Iowa State, A, doesn't want to go play a team, like you and I, which has a roster full of players who felt like they should have been Cyclones,
Spare me with that garbage. All right,
it,
you
it,
can pay for your roster at Iowa State. You can't pay for your roster at UNI. Okay, UNI would be so outmatched in that game if Iowa State lost. I mean, that's on them. That's on them at that point. It's not going to be. I hate to count out the little guy. I know David and Goliath happens, but with the way college football is now, such an upset is going to be like, it was already very rare. It's going to become incredibly, incredibly non-existent, rare, very seldom, like 1 in 1,000 upset that happens in college football. Welcome back here to CyHawk Talk, doing Sunday's headlines on a Wednesday. Maybe you're viewing this on a Thursday, but it's actually Saturday's headlines. I'm completely going crazy here. No bye week, so that means we're talking about Saturday's headlines this week because Iowa plays on a Friday. Gross, disgusting. I hate it, but we're doing it because the TV networks say we're doing it. So Saturday's headlines today, starting with Friday Night Blues. I remembered it was a Friday game in my headlines, didn't remember it when I was introing the segment, but Friday Night Blues. I think that Rutgers is going to lose this game. They're going to lose their 3-0 start, their undefeated start, and it's going to be in front of a blackout. Iowa's expecting a raucous, crazy environment. Kirk Ferentz said he expects an electric environment in SHI Stadium in Piscataway, but I think it's going to be a bit of a bummer. They had a sellout last time they hosted Iowa, and they lost that one as well in a Big Ten opener. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a Freaky Friday, maybe, too, if I wanted to use that headline. But I expect Iowa to pull out the victory on the road. Number 2 headline is return of the wide receivers. I don't know if Ben saw this yesterday, but Kirk Ferentz had a little bit of fun with us talking about Iowa's 5 drops against UMass. He said, there's a reason why I tell the guys there's a reason why we call them wide receivers and not wide droppers. And believe it or not, we coach him to catch the ball and not drop the ball. And I think you're going to see a much better performance from the Hawkeye wide receiver core this weekend. And it's going to be the return of the wide receivers. The wide droppers are going to stay in week 3, and the receivers will be back. I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect clean sheet from the receivers. Rutgers has something to say about that, and they have a pretty good defensive back whose name escapes right now. I know his first name's Bo, but I can't remember his last name. He's in my players to watch. One of the highest graded cornerbacks in the country per Pro Football Focus. And then headline number 3 is no more no boys. The Iowa defensive back group has come away with no turnovers through the first 3 weeks, and so a linebackers coach Seth Wallace is calling them the No Boys instead of the Doughboys because they're not getting any turnovers, playing off their old nickname where they were, constantly getting turnovers. They were, making some dough, so they're the No Boys, and I think they're going to put that bad nickname to rest this weekend, get a couple of turnovers on Ethan Kaliak-Manis, who they have a little bit of history with from his time at Minnesota. Same with their offensive coordinator at Rutgers. He was also previously at Minnesota. So this is a team that Iowa's defense feels a little bit of familiarity with, and I think that's going to pay off in a couple of turnovers. What do you think, Ben?
I'm gonna hand out a B plus for your headlines this week. I really liked Friday Night Blues. Great pun there. No more no boys. If you can explain the Z in the boys, maybe that would make a little bit more sense. I guess if you're gonna name a secondary unit, you got to have a little bit of swag, a little bit of flair there.
I didn't make the nickname. They're Doughboys with a Z is their nickname for themselves, and so the No Boys carries the Z with them. So that's where the Z is coming from.
Gotcha. Well, since I am in my suit and tie, I can officially hand out a grade, and I'll give it a B plus.
I don't know if it's a tweed suit. You got patches on the elbows by chance. You're really looking like a professor today.
No, not quite. No patches.
Maybe there'll be patches on Sunday when we catch you guys for a Sunday rewind. I doubt it, but we'll see. Ben's got plenty of surprises up his sleeves. That'll be it for CyHawk Talk here on a Wednesday. Thanks for watching.